5 paintings disappeared, not stolen in the chaos of an audacious break-in, not seized in the frenzy of a violent robbery. They vanished silently, meticulously, and the world didn't notice. For an entire year, the masterpieces existed only in memory, their absence invisible to everyone who should have been paying attention. Museums, curators, collectors, the public, no one realized that 5 works of extraordinary value had been removed from the cultural record. The theft was not a spectacle. There were no alarms blaring in the dead of night, no flashing lights, no frantic calls to police. There were no eyewitnesses, only empty frames and the faint echo of hands lifting a canvas with care. Whoever orchestrated this heist understood a simple truth: the greatest theft is the one that leaves no trace. Not even the act itself mattered. It was the invisibility of the crime that made it audacious. These were not minor paintings. They were works that defined eras, the kind of pieces that are the pride of museums and private collectors alike. One was a 19th-century French landscape, its light so precise it seemed to flow like molten gold across the canvas. Another, a Dutch still life, so meticulous that each fruit, each reflection, each shadow felt alive. There was an early Picasso sketch, raw, violent, tender, a Baroque portrait whose sitter's eyes could pierce centuries. And finally, a small but essential Impressionist piece, a fleeting moment captured in brushstrokes that vibrated with life. Each painting had been carefully chosen, not for their monetary worth alone, but for the weight they carried, the centuries of human vision, labor, and obsession condensed into pigments and canvas. The thief, if that is the correct word, was methodical. This was not a crime of opportunity. The process required patience, knowledge, and an intimate understanding of human routines. Security guards follow patterns, cameras have blind spots, keys are misplaced, and schedules repeat themselves like clockwork. The person or persons behind the heist observed, recorded, and memorized each minute detail until executing the theft became almost inevitable. Timing was everything. A door opened too early, a shadow moved too slowly, a camera rotated just a fraction. Any mistake would have ended the plan. But no mistake was made. For months, each painting was removed one by one, transported, cataloged in secret and hidden. Some were stored in private collections, isolated from the world that had once revered them. Others disappeared entirely. Even today, the fate of every piece remains partially unknown. The audacity of the operation was that it could exist entirely in the shadows, unnoticed. And because no one noticed, it was almost as if the theft itself had rewritten the rules of reality. The world assumed the art was still there, and in that assumption, the theft found its refuge. When the absence was finally recognized, the discovery was quiet, understated. It was not the dramatic revelation of flashing headlines and police sirens. It began with small observations: a frame slightly askew, a reflection that didn't match the room, a ledger entry that seemed off. Curators double-checked records, scrutinized inventory lists, and gradually realized that 5 major works were missing. 5 masterpieces had disappeared without leaving a mark, and they had done so for an entire year. The very thought was unsettling. How could such weight, such history, be removed without notice? And yet it had happened. Speculation followed. Authorities explored every possibility, from disgruntled employees to professional criminal networks. Some suggested a collector obsessed with possessing the unattainable, someone willing to operate in the cold logic of absence. Others proposed an insider, someone with access and knowledge enough to avoid suspicion. Each theory had merit, yet each ran up against the same problem. No one had seen anything. There were no fingerprints, no security breaches, no eyewitnesses. It was as if the paintings had evaporated into the air. The public, when finally informed, reacted with a mix of disbelief and fascination. Art has long been considered sacred, untouchable, a domain where human ambition is both celebrated and constrained. Yet this theft challenged that assumption. If a single individual could remove masterpieces of incalculable value and knowledge from the world without detection, what did that say about our faith in security, in memory, in the permanence of culture itself? The event became a reflection, a mirror of our own inattentiveness, a story less about criminality than about absence. The thief, in this sense, was not merely taking paintings, they were taking the certainty of our world. The mechanics of the heist were as elegant as they were invisible. Consider the precision required. Cameras positioned to capture every detail, guards patrolling on repeating cycles, doors with multiple locks. All these elements became part of a pattern, a rhythm that could be studied, memorized, and exploited. The thief did not rush. There was no dramatic entrance, no disguise required. The operation relied on knowledge, patience, and silence. Each painting moved like a ghost through the world, unnoticed and unremarkable. And by the time anyone realized it was gone, the thief had long vanished into anonymity. Yet the theft was more than technique. It was obsession. Each piece selected, each frame removed, carefully wrapped and transported. The act was meticulous because the painterly histories of these works demanded it. One could imagine the thief spending hours, or even days, studying the brushwork, the colors, the exact dimensions of frames. It was an almost reverent theft, a perverse form of admiration, one that treated absence as an art form itself. The removal of a masterpiece, after all, is not only a loss, it is a statement. It declares that ownership, or even the act of seeing, can be manipulated. And in this manipulation, there is power. After discovery, the world attempted to reconstruct the timeline, to trace each painting's trajectory, to understand how 5 masterpieces could disappear without detection. The answer, in part, was the world's own inattentiveness. Museums are vast, crowded spaces. Staff rotate, visitors come and go, exhibitions change. In such a dynamic environment, the subtle disappearance of art can slip past even the most experienced eyes. The thief exploited human assumption. If you believe something exists, you will never look for it. And for a year, no one looked. As investigations unfolded, one constant remained: the art had left a void. The empty frames, the silent rooms, the missing brushstrokes all became symbols of the crime. Not merely of theft, but of invisibility itself. There is a strange beauty in that emptiness, a reminder that absence is as powerful as presence, that what we fail to notice often shapes reality more than what we see. The world had lived for a year with a lie, that the paintings were still there, hanging in galleries, existing for the public. In reality, they were gone, leaving only shadows behind. Some masterpieces were eventually recovered, though not all. Some returned to public view, wrapped in new security protocols, surrounded by an almost obsessive vigilance. Others remain in private hands or vanished entirely, their locations unknown. Each recovery raises questions about value, possession, and the ethics of collecting. If art can be taken without notice, does it truly belong to anyone? Or does its power lie in the possibility of disappearance, in the fragility of the world's memory? And perhaps that is the most haunting aspect of this story. The thief, if we call them that, understood invisibility as an art form. They operated in silence, removing objects of immense cultural significance without ceremony or spectacle. They challenged assumptions, manipulated attention, and reshaped the way the world perceives permanence. For a year, the masterpieces existed only in absence, and in that absence, they gained a new meaning. The void became their canvas, the world their unwitting audience. Art is supposed to endure. It is meant to be permanent, to survive centuries, to witness history. Yet this theft demonstrated that permanence is fragile, contingent, and dependent on human vigilance. A single individual, armed with knowledge, patience, and cunning, can rewrite what exists and what does not. The story is not only about 5 paintings, but about the invisible lines that govern our lives. Security, attention, memory, they are all fragile. And sometimes the most audacious crime is not one of force, but of invisibility. This is why the story endures. The vanished masterpieces are now a legend, a quiet reminder that the world is full of gaps we do not see. The theft is not merely a crime. It is a meditation on absence, on the power of invisibility, and on the human tendency to assume permanence where none exists. For a year, 5 paintings ceased to exist for anyone but the thief, and in that cessation, they transformed from objects of admiration into symbols of silence. Even now, years later, the memory of the theft lingers. Experts, curators, and the public continue to discuss the audacity, the subtlety, the sheer invisibility of the act. It forces a reckoning with how fragile our systems are, how fleeting our attentiveness can be, and how much of the world exists only because we believe it does. The art was stolen, yes, but perhaps more strikingly, our trust in continuity, our assumption of permanence, was stolen along with it. In the end, we are left with absence. Empty walls, missing canvases, questions that may never be answered. And in that absence, we see more than just loss. We see reflection. We see the quiet reminder that the world is always shifting, that what we assume to exist may already be gone. And in that realization, the theft becomes something larger than crime, a meditation on invisibility, on patience, on the fragile thread by which culture hangs. The thief may remain unknown, the paintings may remain partially lost, but the lesson endures, echoing through galleries, archives, and the memory of anyone who contemplates what it means for something beautiful to disappear, quietly for a year, without anyone noticing.